The warship Vindication lay cloaked in the shadows of Earth's moon, a towering behemoth of human ingenuity and determination. It was a symbol of everything humanity had achieved. And now, it was their only hope. Its hull gleamed under the cold light of distant stars, and though it was a marvel of technology, it was still new, unproven in battle, and only recently completed after years of secret research and development. Earth's leaders had pinned all their hopes on this ship, but the looming presence of the Zolthar Empire threatened to crush any notion of victory before it had even begun. Zolthar, the so-called Tyrant of the Stars, was an ancient ruler whose empire stretched across hundreds of systems. His reign was built on fear, his armies merciless and ruthless, crushing any species that dared defy him. There was no mercy in Zolthar's world, only submission or annihilation. His empire had already wiped out countless civilizations, and Earth was next. Humanity, in comparison to the ancient powers of the galaxy, was little more than an insect to be squashed beneath the boots of an overlord. In the High Council chambers, Earth's leaders gathered in grim silence. The moment was dire. They had no allies, no ancient war fleets to rely on, only their wits and the sheer tenacity that had carried them through centuries of survival on a hostile world. The news of Zolthar's advance had come swiftly, and there was little time to prepare. His fleet, thousands strong, would arrive within weeks. "Captain Stryker, this is our last chance," General Isaac Novak said, his voice grim as he addressed the woman who stood before them. "The Vindication is humanity's weapon, but it's still untested in actual combat. We don't know what will happen when we face Zolthar's fleet." Captain Evelyn Stryker, standing tall and resolute, nodded. She had trained for this moment her entire life, but no amount of training could fully prepare one for the scale of the war that was about to unfold. Her team, her family now, was aboard the Vindication, a crew made up of soldiers, scientists, engineers, and strategists. They were as diverse as humanity itself, bound together by a single purpose: to protect their home. "We don't need to match them ship for ship," Captain Stryker said, her voice steady, even in the face of certain death. "We need to outsmart them. We can use their own arrogance against them." General Novak looked doubtful, but he could see the fire in Stryker's eyes, the kind of resolve only humanity could possess. "And you think it's enough?" Stryker's lips curled into a small, confident smile. "It will have to be." Outside, the vast fleet of the Zolthar Empire loomed closer, their ships appearing as monstrous shadows against the endless expanse of space. Zolthar's ships were enormous, fortresses in the void, their hulls thick with armor and their weapons capable of vaporizing entire cities in seconds. The Tyrant's invasion was imminent, and Earth stood at the crossroads of survival and extinction. As Captain Stryker walked through the corridors of the Vindication, the crew prepared. Her officers worked tirelessly, double-checking systems, coordinating with Earth's remaining military forces, and running simulations. Every second counted, and the pressure was mounting. The odds were impossible. Humanity had no illusions about that, but Stryker had seen the best of humanity in the most desperate of situations. She had seen their ingenuity, their capacity for innovation, and their refusal to bow to tyranny. When the order came to launch, she took a deep breath and made her way to the bridge, her crew at the ready. The battle for Earth had begun. Outside, the stars seemed to watch in silence, as if the entire galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity to make its stand. The Vindication's engines roared to life, its massive thrusters propelling it out of Earth's orbit and into the cold, endless void of space. Captain Stryker stood on the bridge, her hands clasped firmly behind her back, eyes locked on the starry expanse before them. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for. The moment when they would either prove their worth or face annihilation. "Status report," Stryker said, her voice calm but carrying a weight of authority that had earned the respect of every officer on the bridge. "Shields at full power, Captain." Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the ship's tactical officer, responded, his fingers dancing across the control panels. "Weapons are primed, and all systems are online. We're ready." Stryker nodded, her gaze shifting to the view screen where distant stars glinted like pinpricks of light. In the distance, the first wave of Zolthar's fleet appeared. Massive, hulking warships that seemed to stretch on forever. The alien ships were terrifying in their sheer scale, each one a fortress of destruction. Some were over a mile long, their hulls designed for maximum intimidation. Thousands of turrets bristled from their surfaces, weapons capable of decimating entire fleets in mere moments. "Sir," Ensign Tessa Grant called from communications, her voice tense. "Zolthar's flagship has just dropped out of hyperspace. It's huge." The reports were accurate. Stryker's gaze never wavered. She'd seen the specs, and she'd heard the stories, but nothing truly prepared her for the sight of the flagship. It was a floating city, its dark hull adorned with grotesque alien designs and terrifying weapon arrays. The symbol of Zolthar's reign, a massive, glowering skull, was emblazoned across its stern, a reminder of the terror it carried. The flagship was the heart of the Zolthar Empire's fleet, and it was now bearing down on Earth with all the fury of a dying star. "Targeting systems locked," Captain Hale reported, his tone colder now. "We have a clear shot." Stryker took a deep breath. They had prepared for this. They had trained for this. But no amount of preparation could fully steel her nerves for what was about to unfold. Humanity's first true test against the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. "Hold fire," she commanded. "We need them to underestimate us." "Understood," Hale responded, his fingers hovering over the fire controls. The fleet of Zolthar's warships advanced in formation, their enormous size casting shadows over the Vindication. The human ship was dwarfed, but Captain Stryker had already devised a plan that would give them a fighting chance. She knew the Zolthar forces would assume that humanity would engage head-on, matching their firepower in a futile show of strength. But that would play directly into the hands of their enemies. Instead, the Vindication would use speed and agility, striking when the Zolthar fleet least expected it. Humanity had the advantage of creativity, adaptability, and the element of surprise. This was their moment to prove that the old ways of war, brute force, overwhelming numbers, could be overcome with ingenuity. Stryker's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of her captain's chair as she watched the massive alien fleet inch closer. They were confident, too confident. It was time to make them regret underestimating humanity. "Ready the first wave," Stryker said, her voice low but filled with determination. "Deploy all drones. Engage in hit-and-run tactics. We need to make them question their superiority." Her command was followed by a flurry of activity. Small, nimble drone fighters shot out from the Vindication, their sleek frames zipping toward the Zolthar fleet like a swarm of angry hornets. The enemy was slow to react, believing the drones to be a mere distraction. It was then that the humans struck, firing their first salvo with precision and speed, targeting key weak points in the Zolthar ship's shields. A massive explosion erupted from one of Zolthar's forward ships, followed by several others in quick succession. The Vindication and its drones wove in and out of the chaos, avoiding enemy fire and striking again and again. Zolthar's fleet was caught off guard, and the humans, small, weak, and inexperienced, were giving them more than they had bargained for. Direct hit on their power core. Lieutenant Hale shouted, "We've crippled one of their battleships." Stryker's heart raced, but she kept her focus. It was working. The Zolthar fleet was disorganized, and their arrogance was their greatest weakness. Humanity had the ability to outthink them, to use their creativity to turn the tide of the battle. "Captain, reinforcements are coming in," Ensign Grant called out, her voice tight with excitement. "The rest of the fleet is arriving." For a moment, the bridge fell silent as the human forces, working together in perfect coordination, launched another wave of attacks. The once intimidating Zolthar fleet now looked vulnerable, scattered and unsure of what to do. Humanity had thrown the first punch, and it had landed. "Keep it up," Captain Stryker said, her voice calm, but with the underlying intensity that had become her trademark. "This is just the beginning." As the battle raged on, Earth's forces, once mere ants in the galaxy, were now proving that they were more than capable of holding their ground. Humanity had finally shown the galaxy that they would not bow to tyranny. They were ready to fight for their future. The battle had erupted in the cold void of space, a chaotic symphony of flashing lights and massive explosions. The Vindication and its drones darted in and out of the Zolfar fleet, striking with precision, creating a maelstrom of destruction. Humanity's tactics were unconventional, using speed, unpredictability, and guerrilla-style warfare. The Zolfar forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, were caught off guard. It was a moment of triumph, but the fight was far from over. Captain Stryker stood resolute on the bridge, her eyes scanning the view screen as the battle unfolded. The Zolfar fleet, though staggered, was regrouping. They were adapting, and with every second that passed, their counterattacks grew more brutal. The Vindication's shields flickered with every hit, but they held, a testament to the strength of human engineering. "Captain," Lieutenant Hale called, his voice tense. "They're deploying reinforcements. More dreadnoughts, at least 6. The flagship is turning to engage us directly." Stryker's eyes narrowed. The Zolfar flagship was already monstrous in size. But now, it seemed like the entire ship was alive with menace. The Tyrant's flagship, a dark fortress of doom, was bearing down on them, its weapons bristling like the fangs of a predator. There was no doubt in her mind that Zolfar was preparing to unleash the full wrath of his fleet. This was a turning point. If they couldn't outmaneuver them, if they couldn't strike first, they would be overrun. "All hands, brace for impact," Stryker ordered. The Vindication shook as several enemy ships launched a barrage of fire. For a moment, it felt as though the entire ship might break apart, but Stryker's crew held their ground. Every officer on the bridge was working in perfect harmony, moving with purpose. The humans had come so far already, and now, more than ever, their resolve would be tested. "Captain, the Zolfar fleet is advancing in full force," Ensign Grant reported, her voice strained as she analyzed the tactical situation. "We can't keep this up for long. We need a plan." Stryker knew they didn't have much time. Zolfar's fleet was vast, and their firepower was overwhelming. The Vindication had already made its mark, but they couldn't afford to let their success go to their heads. The Zolfar forces were now fully aware of humanity's capabilities, and they wouldn't underestimate them again. Stryker's mind raced, running through every possible scenario. She couldn't just fight. She had to outthink Zolfar. They needed to create an opening, a way to strike at the heart of the enemy's fleet. And in that moment, it hit her. "Get me a direct link to the Vindication's AI system," she commanded. "Connecting now," Hale said, and within moments, the voice of the ship's artificial intelligence filled the bridge. "Captain Stryker, how may I assist?" "We need to disrupt their command and control structure. If we can take out their flagship's communications, we can cripple their coordination. We'll go in silent. No warning, just a surgical strike." The AI processed the data rapidly, running through calculations and simulations. "Understood. A micropulse from the Vindication's comms array will interfere with their fleet's communication channels. However, this will be a one-time use. Once deployed, their fleet will be temporarily blind." Stryker turned to her crew. "This is our chance. We'll break their formation, scatter their forces. We won't be able to destroy them all, but we can disrupt their leadership long enough to make our strike." The officers nodded in unison, ready to implement the plan. Lieutenant Hale set a course for the flagship's aft. "We'll use their own tactics against them." Ensign Grant, initiate the comms pulse as soon as we're within range. Timing is everything. The bridge was a flurry of motion as the crew readied themselves. The Vindication veered off course, heading straight for the Zolfar flagship's exposed rear. The alien ships, unable to track their movements fast enough, continued their assault on Earth's remaining fleet, unaware that the humans were about to strike again. Captain Stryker's mind was focused entirely on the task ahead. Every second counted. As the Vindication closed the distance, she felt the weight of the moment. This was the moment that could turn the tide. If they succeeded, the Zolthar fleet would be thrown into disarray, vulnerable to a follow-up attack. If they failed, the Vindication would be lost, and Earth's survival would be at risk. Now, Stryker commanded. Ensign Grant hit the button, sending a surge of energy through the ship's comms array. The pulse shot through the void, a silent signal cutting through the Zolthar flagship's communication system. For a brief moment, the Zolthar fleet froze, their coordination disrupted. Confusion spread like wildfire across the enemy lines. Their ships faltered, firing blindly into the void, unable to communicate with each other. "Captain, it's working," Hale shouted. "The flagship's communications are down. They're scrambling to regain control." Stryker's heart surged with a mix of hope and adrenaline. This was it. The window was open. "Prepare for the final strike," Stryker ordered. "We hit them hard and fast. This is our moment, people. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." As the Vindication surged forward into the heart of the enemy fleet, the crew braced for the most dangerous part of their mission. The rising storm was about to reach its peak. The Vindication surged forward, its engines firing at full power as it cut through the confusion of the Zolthar fleet. The artificial pulse had done its job. Zolthar's flagship and its fleet were disarrayed, their communication systems in chaos. Ships that had once moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine were now stumbling over one another, firing wildly in every direction. Humanity had seized the moment, but the battle was far from won. Captain Stryker's hands gripped the armrests of her command chair. Her mind raced as she analyzed the unfolding situation. This was their opening. Now it was time to exploit it. The Zolthar flagship, a gargantuan warship, was still a formidable target. The Vindication had the advantage of surprise, but it wouldn't last long. She needed to act fast. "Prepare the phase cannon," Stryker ordered, her voice sharp and determined. The Vindication had a new weapon, one that had never been tested in real combat before. The phase cannon was a cutting-edge human technology, capable of sending devastating energy pulses that could bypass shields and strike at a ship's core. If they could land a direct hit on the flagship, it would cripple the enemy's command center and potentially disable the entire fleet. Phase cannon primed and ready. Lieutenant Hale confirmed, his fingers moving swiftly across the console. "We have a clear shot." The crew held their breath as Stryker's eyes locked onto the Zolthar flagship, now just moments away. The chaos within the enemy fleet had bought them time, but the longer they stayed in range, the higher the risk. The Vindication's engines were already overheating from the prolonged engagement, and their shields were flickering. "Fire on my mark," Stryker commanded. The ship's eye, faster than any human, calibrated the cannon's trajectory, calculating the perfect angle of impact. Every officer on the bridge was tense, their gazes fixed on the screen. The target was enormous, but the challenge was precision. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the Vindication would be torn apart. Stryker's heartbeat quickened. The moment of truth had arrived. "Mark," she shouted. The phase cannon discharged in a brilliant burst of light, its pulse a streak of energy that shot across the darkness of space. The flash of light illuminated the vastness around them as the blast hit the Zolthar flagship squarely in the aft section. There was a momentary silence as the pulse impacted the flagship's hull. Then, the flagship shuddered violently. A massive explosion erupted from the rear of the ship, a flare of blue energy blooming like a star-gone supernova. The shockwave reverberated through space, sending ripples across the Zolthar fleet. The flagship's engine sputtered, its movements sluggish as sparks flew from ruptured conduits. The human crew watched in awe and horror as the giant warship trembled. "We did it," Hale breathed, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We've damaged their propulsion and shields. The flagship's gone dark. They're crippled." But the victory felt fleeting. Stryker knew that despite the damage, Zolfar wouldn't give up easily. The flagship's destruction, or at least the disabling of its core systems, was a critical blow, but the fight was far from over. Zolfar would throw everything he had left at them. Braced for impact. Stryker yelled, realizing too late that the Zolfar fleet wasn't finished. In response to the crippling blow, several of the enemy dreadnoughts repositioned, closing in on the Vindication from all sides. They fired relentlessly, and though the Vindication's shields held for now, it was clear they were weakening under the assault. "We're running out of time," Ensign Grant cried, her hands flying across the communication console. "Zolfar's fleet is regrouping. More ships are coming in. An entire second wave." Stryker's mind was a whirl of strategies, but there was no time for hesitation. They had done the impossible, but now it was time to finish the job. "Set a course for the flagship's lower docking bay," she ordered urgently. "We'll hit them from the inside. We have to take out their command center. It's our only chance." "Captain, the Vindication can't take much more," Hale protested, his face pale. "The hull's integrity is compromised. The shields are failing." Stryker looked at her crew, every single one of them ready for the next step, despite the danger. Their resolve matched hers. She knew that they were about to make a desperate push. A direct assault on the flagship would be dangerous, but it was their best shot. "We don't stop now," Stryker said firmly. "We fight until the very end. This is humanity's future on the line." As the Vindication shifted course, aiming straight for the Zolfar flagship's exposed docking bay, the crew prepared themselves for the ultimate gamble. The battle was reaching its most intense moment, and though their chances were slim, the fire in their hearts was undeniable. Humanity had made its stand, and it was going to fight with everything it had. In the heart of the Zolfar fleet, as the ships closed in, humanity's resolve had never been clearer. They had already made an impact no one had expected. Now, they would make their final move to ensure that their future would be forged in the stars, not extinguished by a tyrant's hand. The Vindication tore through the chaos of battle, its engines roaring as it moved toward the Zolfar flagship's exposed docking bay. The Zolfar fleet was in disarray, but their fury had only just begun. Enemy ships closed in from every direction, relentlessly hammering the human warship with fire. The Vindication's shields, already battered, flickered dangerously, the energy reserves nearing depletion. "Shields are at 20%. Lieutenant Hale shouted, his voice laced with panic as a blast rocked the ship. "We can't take much more of this. Keep pushing forward." Captain Stryker barked, her voice unwavering. She knew they couldn't afford to retreat now. The flagship was within reach, and their window of opportunity was closing fast. "Prepare for docking procedures. Ensign Grant, patch us through to the main bay's security feeds. We need to see what we're up against once we're in." Grant's hands flew over the console. "Aye, Captain. I'm pulling up the bay's interior layout now." The view screen shifted, displaying a schematic of the Zolfar flagship's lower docking bay. It was enormous, large enough to house dozens of enemy fighters and war machines. But it was also heavily fortified, with thick walls and automated defense systems positioned throughout. Their only chance was to board quickly, overwhelm the security forces, and disable the command center from within. "They're deploying more defense drones," Grant shouted. "We won't make it through unscathed." Stryker's mind raced. They needed to disable the drones before they could reach them. The Vindication had drones of its own, but the Zolfars were far more advanced, larger, faster, and equipped with energy shields that could tear through their own smaller units. They needed to strike first, to buy themselves just enough time to board before the defenses could engage. "Launch the drone counteroffensive," Stryker ordered. Deploy all remaining drones to take out the Zolfar units. We're going it now." Hale's fingers danced over the controls, and the Vindication's remaining drones shot from their hangars, their weapons blazing as they tore through the Zolfar drones in a swift, precise strike. Explosions erupted across the battlefield, but the human drones were outmatched by sheer numbers. They only needed to hold out long enough for the Vindication to dock and deploy their boarding teams. "Engage magnetic locks," Stryker commanded. The Vindication lurched as its massive docking claws latched onto the bay of the Zolfar flagship, securing the ship to the enemy vessel. "Captain, we're locked on," Grant confirmed. "We're ready for boarding, but we don't have much time. Zolfar's fleet is re-coordinating. They'll be on us any second." Stryker stood, her gaze steely. "This is it. All hands, prepare to board. We strike hard and fast. This is our chance to end this." The crew scrambled into position. Stryker was already donned in her combat suit, her mind focusing on the mission. They had to breach the flagship's command center, take down its leadership, and most importantly, Zolfar himself. Without his direct command, the Zolfar forces would be leaderless, vulnerable. It was their one shot to end the war. The airlock door hissed open, and Stryker led the way, her hand steady as she gripped her weapon. Behind her, a team of specially trained soldiers, each one a veteran of the most brutal conflicts Earth had ever known, followed close behind, their expressions set in grim determination. The interior of the Zolfar flagship was a stark contrast to the Vindication, cold, sterile, and alien in every sense. The walls were adorned with the grotesque symbols of the Zolfar Empire, their jagged lines and disturbing shapes serving as a constant reminder of the tyranny that had oppressed countless worlds. The crew moved silently, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with practiced precision, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the ship. "We're close," Stryker whispered. "Stick to the plan. We breach the command center and eliminate anyone in our way." As they rounded a corner, they encountered their first resistance. A group of Zolfar soldiers, armored in black exosuits, stood in the hallway, weapons raised. They hadn't expected the humans to be so bold, so quick. But now, it was too late. "Engage," Stryker ordered. The humans unleashed a flurry of fire, their weapons trained on the alien soldiers. The Zolfar responded in kind, their energy rifles lighting up the corridor in deadly arcs of plasma. But the humans had the advantage of numbers and strategy. They had prepared for this, and their response was faster, more calculated. Within moments, the Zolfar soldiers were neutralized, their bodies falling to the ground with heavy thuds. But there was no time to celebrate. The breach had drawn attention. Alarm sirens began blaring throughout the flagship as the sounds of reinforcements echoed down the hall. "Move! Move! Move!" Stryker shouted, her team pushing forward with renewed urgency. They sprinted through the ship, each step taking them closer to the heart of the Zolfar Empire. The command center was just ahead, guarded by a reinforced door, the final obstacle. Stryker's fingers twitched at the thought of what awaited them inside. Zolfar would be there, waiting, no doubt, behind layers of security. But they had come this far. They would not falter now. "Ready yourselves," Stryker said, her voice cold and steady. "This is where it ends." With a single command, the door exploded open, revealing the heart of the Zolfar Empire, the command center. The command center was a towering chamber, its walls lined with holographic displays that pulsed with alien symbols and data. The air was thick with the scent of metallic sterility and the hum of advanced machinery. Zolfar's seat of power, the heart of his empire, was laid bare before them. Captain Stryker's eyes swept over the room, locking onto the central command station where Zolfar himself sat. A monstrous figure, tall and imposing, cloaked in black armor that shimmered with an unnatural gleam. His alien features, a grotesque mix of reptilian and insectoid, stared back at her, a pair of cruel eyes gleaming with fury and disdain. The tyrant had known they were coming. He had prepared for this moment, but Stryker had no intention of letting him escape. "Captain Stryker," Zolthar's voice boomed across the room, amplified by the room's speakers. It was a cold, venomous sound, full of arrogance. "You dare enter my sanctum, thinking you can end the age I have created. You are nothing but ants beneath my feet. Your struggle is futile." Stryker's pulse quickened, but she stood tall. She had come this far, and she would see this through to the end. "Your reign of terror ends today, Zolthar. Humanity will never bow to you or any tyrant. We fight to the death, but we fight for our future." Zolthar's lips curled into a sinister grin, a mocking sneer that sent chills through the air. "You are brave, human. I will give you that. But your foolishness will be your undoing. You will die with your people, just as your species always has. Weak and insignificant. Enough talk." Stryker snapped, signaling to her team. Without hesitation, they rushed forward, weapons raised, but before they could close the distance, the room's security systems flared to life. Energy shields sprang up around Zolthar's command station, casting a shimmering blue barrier between him and the humans. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, their barrels whirring as they locked onto their targets. "Prepare yourselves," Stryker shouted. "Engage the turrets." The soldiers immediately scattered, seeking cover as the turrets opened fire, sending streams of plasma and energy beams ripping through the room. The humans returned fire, their weapons hissing as they targeted the turrets' weak points. The air crackled with the chaos of battle. "Captain, there's a problem," Ensign Grant yelled over the din. "Zolthar's shields are invulnerable to our weapons. We need a way to disable them." Stryker's mind raced. The situation had escalated far faster than expected. Zolthar's defenses were far more advanced than they had been prepared for. They needed to disable the shields long enough to get close enough to strike at the alien tyrant. "Use the phase disruptors," Stryker ordered. "We've got no time to waste." Lieutenant Hale quickly complied, activating the Vindication's phase disruptors, designed specifically to counteract enemy energy shields. The powerful pulse ripped through the air, hitting the shields around Zolthar's command station. For a moment, the aliens' defenses flickered, just long enough to give the humans an opening. "Now," Stryker commanded. The team advanced, charging through the hail of fire as the phase disruptors created a brief gap in Zolthar's shields. They dove into the fray, closing the distance between them and the tyrant's command station. Zolthar, watching them approach, sneered once again. "Do you think you can defeat me? You are nothing." With a snap of his armored fingers, the ground beneath them trembled. A group of Zolthar soldiers, seemingly materializing from hidden alcoves, rushed to their commander's side, forming a tight defensive perimeter. They raised their weapons, ready to engage the humans in a final stand. But the humans were prepared for this. Stryker's team was quick, their movements fluid as they took down Zolthar's soldiers with deadly precision. The battle was fierce, but they had the element of surprise, and they knew they couldn't afford to let up. Stryker was at the forefront, her pulse pounding in her chest as she darted between the enemy soldiers, her blaster cutting down their ranks with ruthless efficiency. She was focused, her every movement purposeful as she aimed for the weak points in their armor. The Zolthar soldiers were strong and relentless, but they weren't prepared for the speed and precision of human tactics. The tide of the battle was turning. "Push forward," Stryker shouted as she reached the final group of Zolthar soldiers guarding the command center. They were the last line between humanity and the tyrant who had oppressed countless worlds, but she could feel victory within her grasp. At that moment, Zolthar finally rose from his command throne, his massive form towering over the battlefield. His eyes burned with fury as he drew an energy blade from his side, a weapon crackling with pure, destructive power. "You think you can defeat me, human? I am the ruler of this galaxy. I am the future of all life." Stryker didn't hesitate. She advanced, her team falling in behind her as they closed the gap between them and Zolthar. The final confrontation was at hand. The time for words was over. Now, they would see who would emerge victorious. Stryker raised her weapon, her eyes fixed on the alien tyrant before her. This was the moment. This was the end of the war. Zolthar's energy blade crackled with raw power, its dark red glow casting an eerie light across the battlefield. His alien eyes locked onto Captain Stryker as he stood towering over the remains of his soldiers, fury radiating from every fiber of his being. "You cannot win," Zolthar spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You are nothing but a fleeting spark in the vastness of my empire. Your species has no place here. You are nothing without your precious vindication and your pathetic drones." Stryker narrowed her eyes, her grip tightening around her weapon. The words of the tyrant only fueled her resolve. She had heard enough. She wasn't here for speeches. She was here to end this war, to end the suffering, and to prove that humanity was not to be ruled by anyone, least of all this alien overlord. Without warning, Zolthar lunged forward, his blade sweeping through the air in a deadly arc. Stryker dodged just in time, narrowly avoiding the swing that would have cleaved her in two. The force of his strike sent a shockwave through the air, the power of the blow enough to rattle the walls around them. Her team scattered, quickly taking cover behind the walls of the command center. Stryker's mind raced. Zolthar's strength was overwhelming, and his energy blade was unlike anything humanity had encountered. But they had one advantage: speed, agility, and coordination. She just had to get close enough. "Grant, on my mark, fire the EMP." Stryker called out to the ensign, her eyes locked on the alien tyrant as he prepared to strike again. "We need to disable his energy blade." Ensign Grant acknowledged the command with a brief nod, her hands quickly manipulating the controls to prepare the EMP device. It was their last hope. If they could disable Zolthar's weapon, they'd have a shot at taking him down. Zolthar raised his blade once more, aiming for Stryker's head. But she wasn't there. With lightning-fast reflexes, she rolled to the side, using the momentum to launch herself forward, diving beneath the tyrant's strike. The force of the blade crashing into the floor sent a tremor through the room, but Stryker was already on her feet, closing in fast. "Now," she shouted. Grant activated the EMP, sending a pulse of energy that flooded the room. Zolthar's blade sputtered, the glow flickering as his weapon temporarily lost power. For a brief moment, he was vulnerable. Stryker didn't hesitate. She surged forward with all the force she could muster, driving her blaster into Zolthar's side. The shot rang out, striking the alien's armor, but it barely left a dent. The Zolthar was still too strong. With a roar of fury, Zolthar swiped his blade at Stryker, but she ducked and twisted, narrowly avoiding the attack. Her heart raced and her thoughts whirled. This wasn't enough. They needed more. She had to break through, had to find the weakness that would bring him down. The tyrant stepped back, snarling as his energy blade powered back to full strength. His eyes glinted with malevolent pride. "You truly think you can defeat me?" Zolthar sneered. "I am the ultimate evolution. You are nothing." Stryker stood tall, the weight of his words trying to pierce her confidence, but she wouldn't be swayed. They were at the heart of the Zolthar Empire, facing the source of all their suffering, and she would not let humanity fall. "Maybe we're nothing to you," Stryker replied, her voice unwavering, "but you've underestimated us from the start. This isn't just a fight for survival. This is a fight for our future, and we will win." Her words were more than a declaration. They were a rallying cry. "Get ready," she called to her team. "Flank him. Now." Her crew sprang into action, each member of the team moving with precision and purpose. They knew what they had to do. Stryker and her team would give everything they had in this final push. As Zolthar turned his attention toward her soldiers, Stryker saw her opening. With one swift motion, she lunged, aiming for the alien tyrant's unguarded side. Her combat suit enhanced her strength and speed, allowing her to strike with the precision of a trained warrior. She pressed her weapon against Zolthar's armor again, this time targeting the weak points. The shot landed. There was a flash of light, and the Zolthar howled in pain as the energy blast exploded against the side of his armor. The force sent him stumbling back, and the tyrant's expression twisted into one of surprise and fury. Stryker's heart surged with hope. They had broken through. Now was their chance. But just as she advanced, Zolthar's eyes blazed with murderous rage. With a roar, he swung his blade once more, this time with a wide arc meant to cleave them all in half. "Move!" Stryker screamed as she dove to the side. The team scattered, barely evading the deadly strike. But Stryker knew they couldn't keep dodging forever. They needed to finish this. Thinking quickly, Stryker activated a second EMP device, aimed directly at Zolthar's blade. This time, she wasn't going to wait. She needed to disable his weapon for good. The pulse hit the blade with full force, and this time, the energy didn't flicker. It went dark entirely. Zolthar let out a ferocious scream as he staggered backward, disarmed. The time had come. Stryker closed the gap, her team moving in alongside her. And together, they overwhelmed the Zolthar tyrant. They fought with everything they had left. Determined, fierce, and unrelenting. It was humanity's last stand. With one final blow, Stryker's weapon found its mark. Zolthar fell to his knees, his enormous frame crumpling to the floor as the life drained from his body. The war was over. The command center was silent, save for the echo of Zolthar's final breaths, which seemed to linger in the air even after his body crumpled to the floor. Captain Stryker stood over him, her chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Her team, battle-worn and bloodied, stood in a semicircle around the fallen tyrant, their weapons lowered but their eyes filled with both relief and disbelief. It was over. The oppressive weight of the last several years, the countless battles, the endless resistance, the sacrifices, lifted from their shoulders like a shroud. The Zolthar Empire, which had crushed entire worlds beneath its iron heel, was no more. And humanity had played its part in ending it. But the victory, though hard-won, came with a bitter realization. The road ahead was still long. The galaxy was in turmoil, and it was up to humanity and its allies to rebuild what had been destroyed. "Captain," Lieutenant Hale's voice broke through the silence. "We did it. We really did it." Stryker didn't respond immediately. Her eyes moved from Zolthar's lifeless form to the view outside the command center's panoramic windows. The stars were beautiful, as they always had been, but now they held a deeper meaning. No longer were they the distant backdrop to an ongoing war. They symbolized freedom. The freedom her people had fought for, bled for, and in some cases, died for. But the war wasn't the only thing that had changed. Humanity, as a species, had proven something far more important than their ability to fight. They had proven their unbreakable spirit, their resolve to never give up, to never be crushed by an oppressor, to adapt and overcome in the face of insurmountable odds. It was this resilience that had made all the difference. The Zolthar had underestimated them, assuming that their young species was too weak, too fractured, to unite against a common enemy. But they were wrong. Humanity had come together, and in doing so, had reshaped the future of the galaxy. Stryker turned to face her team, her eyes filled with pride. "This wasn't just my victory," she said, her voice strong and clear. "This was everyone's. Every soldier, every citizen who believed we could take down the Zolthar. Every sacrifice we've made, every life lost, led us to this moment. We've earned this," Ensign Grant said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "But we can't forget what's still out there. The galaxy needs rebuilding. There are millions of lives to rebuild. The Zolthar might be gone, but the scars they've left won't heal overnight." Stryker nodded. "You're right. This war has shattered worlds. But now, it's our turn to rebuild them. We'll rebuild what we lost and forge a future for the generations to come. Together." She stepped forward, addressing the rest of the crew who had gathered around, their faces marked with the weariness of battle, but also the spark of hope. We didn't just fight for Earth. We fought for every world under Zulfar's thumb, every race, every species that had to bow before his cruelty. The fight is over, but the work has just begun. Now, we bring peace. A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Though they had fought with everything they had, they understood that peace, like war, would take time. It would require healing, negotiation, and cooperation between all the survivors of the galaxy. But this time, humanity would not only be a part of that future, they would lead it. Stryker took one final glance at the command center's shattered view, then turned back to her team. Set course for Earth. Let's return home. The crew nodded, returning to their stations, but there was a new energy in their movements now. The Vindication, the symbol of humanity's strength, was no longer just a warship. It was the ship that would carry them into a new era, where their story would continue, but this time with hope rather than fear in their hearts. As the Vindication began its journey back toward Earth, the crew gathered on the bridge, staring out at the stars, now full of endless possibilities. They had stood against a galaxy-dominating empire, and they had won. But the greatest victory wasn't the fall of Zulfar. It was the realization that humanity was no longer just a fledgling species trying to survive. It was now a force for peace, justice, and hope across the galaxy. And as the ship glided through the stars, Captain Stryker knew that the next chapter in humanity's story had only just begun.